Sigoli, Nadioliwis, Skanagoga, Skanago, Lagwedio ni Yogyaks. Greetings, what is the news, class? Are you with peace? I am with peace. Lagwedio is my name, means he is a good man in Oneida. And I just first and foremost want to say what an honor it truly is to be here, week 4 with you all. So we're more than halfway there. It's all downhill from here, team. You're doing phenomenal. Putting in that hard work, that foundational work. I'm really grateful for each and every one of you as we put our minds together. So be it in our minds. As Sean Wilson, a Cree researcher, says that anytime we come together as how research is ceremony, really talking about this indigenous sacred idea of ceremony. Anytime we're putting together and we're learning, putting our minds together, that indeed is sacred as ceremony. So with that, I just want to say, Yawonko, thank you in Oneida, all of you, for your contributions, for you all being here, for being yourselves, for speaking your truths, and for educating me. I've learned a great deal from this, and I'm looking forward to learning from you all for the next few weeks here as well too. So we're not done just yet, people, and here we go. So as we are going on here, really interesting there for module 3, was what I believe was called the paradox of different readings. So seeing how in the hollow water community, how establishing this restorative justice is so powerful. And then from a couple other authors, a Guest and Towery, of saying, well, when we try to really put forth this hybrid model, it really sometimes we are co-opting this indigenous sacred practice and really still distancing the indigenous people, such as the Maori in New Zealand, who are, even though there's a practice being put forth, but really it still seems like, as the author says, Towery, that the Maori people are still at arm's length from the judicial legal system in terms of having any kind of power or sovereignty. So as we're doing this, I think it's really a word of warning for co-opting or appropriating. Just as we're doing this practice, I think that there's no monolithic answer, as there are over 7.5 million indigenous people from federally and state recognized tribes in the United States, which means there are many more than that in the United States, as there are many different First Nations people in Canada. There's many different indigenous people in Mexico. There are many different indigenous people in Africa. There are many indigenous people in New Zealand and Aboriginal people in Australia. So there's going to be a wide variety of answers on this topic for what is appropriation. In the paper I put forth for you all in the first week was, at the end there's a warning about cultural appropriation. There's a person who is responding to a study of saying, how you're really just giving this lip service. You're saying this is talking circles. You're saying this is this, but really nothing has changed whatsoever. This is really just another idea to dress it up as something which is sacred to us, yet to have no real systemic change. So with this idea, I think that it can be very easy to be scared, to be frightened, to not want to do this work because of feeling like you're in the wrong or doing things wrong. So I would ask you all to take a step back, take a breath. Breathe like you love yourself, think like you love yourself, move like you love yourself. A little bit of a side note, I read in Harvard Business Review, they said, what if you were to cheer on yourself in the same way that you were to cheer on a close friend or someone you loved? So as you have that internal dialogue of love, you're doing the restorative work personally as well too. That's my opinion. If you want to bring balance to the world, you first must bring balance to yourself. But I think, how powerful is it as different educators, as different practitioners, as different people who are in this practice, to your power on how to model and role model and how to do this in terms of acknowledging, educating, and honoring the indigenous roots in Africa and here in Turtle Island, of where this practice comes from, among other places. But I think really just to never stop learning, this effort of lifelong learners, and of humility, and of, when you're working with specific tribal nations, to really try to work with leaders from those tribal nations, whether those are elected officials, for instance, on the Oneida Business Committee in Oneida, or other elders or spiritual leaders, such as in Oneida. We have Loretta Matoxin was our tribal historian who passed away. Bob Brown is our cultural advisor in Oneida. So people who you'd be speaking with perhaps within the community of leaders for those specific communities, and adapting it to those specific communities and listening to those specific communities, but as best you can to acknowledge, educate, and honor, and not trying to co-opt the practice to take it away from its indigenous roots, or malign or to make less than the indigenous roots, or criticize the indigenous roots, but to really step into that indigenous mindset, to really think about what does it mean for the indigenous Plains sign language word, when you're to listen with your heart, it means to I understand. This is Plains indigenous sign language for I understand from my heart, as opposed to American Sign Language to I understand, like coming in from my head, like a light bulb. So there's for myself, as we're looking at this and how to do this correctly, I think that you do it with respect and with reverence. You do it with love to the great creator, love for yourself, love for your community, love for your world, having a good heart, a good mind, and a strong fire. But really, even as it's an estimated about 2% of people living in the United States are indigenous population, roughly, give or take, about how much more is of the 98% of people who need to see this practice and see how to have it modeled well, and how to be a role model to show this practice and to acknowledge, educate, and honor those indigenous roots, whether it be Oneida or Anishinaabe or different nations in Africa, but really making an effort to recognize where this practice comes from before. So that's why I use my eagle feather, as my grandmother taught me this practice, and I'm also English, Irish, and German, right? So I'm also the parts of me that are not Oneida as well too, and I recognize that as I do this, I try to be what's a bridge, as many elders have called me. You're like a bridge between those worlds. I say, yes, indeed I am. But how do you do that well? How do you do that with respect and being able to respect an indigenous practice if you yourself are not an indigenous person? But I believe a lot of this has to do with acknowledging, educating, and honoring the practice of where it comes from, and working with and co-collaborating with specific communities whenever possible. So for some of your readings this week, one of the topics is the truth and reconciliation, and a little bit the state child welfare system, but really just overall truth and reconciliation. And overall, the videos you're gonna be watching are just about those nuts and bolts, even more so about restorative justice. I love that phrase, which is caught on in our Canvas discussions. So one of the chapters you're gonna read is another one from me. It's talking about intergenerational trauma. I start off the chapter talking about playing this game as Assassin's Creed 3, and you're playing as a Mohawk player. And at this one point in the game, your village is being burned down and you're crying out for your mother in your Mohawk language, which just very much just brings up really painful memories for me as an Oneida person, as I think about my ancestors who were the first allies to the United States, were George Washington at Valley Forge from the winters of 1778, 1779. And they would have died and froze to death had it not been for the Oneida and Tuscarora warriors. It was Polly Cooper, her Oneida name was Dolly Cobus, came and brought help to these people. And after George Washington helped them, as the Oneida Museum told me, curators there, his nickname was Village Burner, as Washington went down and systematically burnt down as many Oneida villages as possible because he saw how powerful they were after. So as I'm watching this game, playing this game, I'm pausing it, I'm uncontrollably crying. I'm just thinking about these memories of what that trauma is like inside of me, of those memories from relatives, and trying to make sense of that all. So blood memories of this notion of just these memories inside of us from very painful experiences, lived experiences from forced extermination, termination, and stories that many people do not know about. We're still learning about now in Truth and Reconciliation. In Canada, their committee did a great job looking at the Indigenous residential schools and their impact and unearthing those bodies of children. And we're still learning here in the United States of how that Truth and Reconciliation works. And Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, is doing a great job of leading the way as an Indigenous person, and also in trying to have the people take back the political system as an Indigenous person who the Secretary of the Interior's job is to oversee many of the Indian country, tribal lands as they are in the United States. And it has been said it was never in probably the founding fathers' wildest dreams that an Indigenous person would be in this role. So how do you take back that role, and how do you do that well in a restorative lens, in a way for healing? So we're switching books here a little bit. So this time we're looking at the Navajo Nation Peacemaking book, chapters 1, 2, and 3. There's an introduction in there. There's also a commentary between each chapter, so feel free. They're a couple pages long if you want to get those for more context. So just for some of those readings that are going to be you'll be looking at in this book, is really this theme of horizontal systems. So moving away from a vertical system of having a judge be as impersonal as possible. It was pointed out earlier, which is a great job, and just talking about how this is really what we're aiming for, is really more of a horizontal system instead of a vertical system. And it's really this notion of how important people are as well too, and each other's stories, and be able to connect as a community members, as opposed to leaving the community out. It's encouraging the whole community to be part of the decision-making process for that community healing, for harmony, as was also pointed out by you all in Canvas, by talking about this notion. It's not just about punishing in this adversarial system. It's about healing in this community system, and having preventative healing, and having not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of community, the presence of harmony, the presence of speaking and talking our truths and looking at each other in the eye and holding circles and really just holding community. But really, that's a notion of a horizontal system. Paragraph 1 on page 42 says Navajo justice is unique as it is a product of the experience of the Navajo people. So I think that's important as well too, is looking at the experience of these Dene people, the Navajo people, and really looking at the importance of life experiences and perspectives as well too. I think I've said it and I'll say it again, but I've heard for a philosophy for many Indigenous people is to look at the idea that Mother Earth is on top, the plants are underneath that are the animals, and lastly are us as human beings, where a lot of times if you look in a colonial or Western construct or Eurocentric construct, it's flipped, where you have humans are supposed to be the top, underneath that are the animals, underneath that are plants, and lastly would be the earth. But really this notion that it's a unique system and that you really have to look at the way that the Navajo people live, their cultural values, their really these systemic values of Dene practices for many years, many generations. On paragraph 4, page 80, it says the Navajo judges know the peacemaker court will work only if it is accepted by the people who are to make it work. So recognizing that buy-in, that importance of that voluntary buy-in and community buy-in, how important that is as well too. So here's some of the videos and also some optional videos as well too. If you want to learn more about ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, and here Fawn Sharp talking about enforcing the Indian Child Welfare Act to protect Native children. Those videos from the previous page here, reconciliation through restorative justice. This one, how to conduct talking circles by Don Coyhis here, really powerful for me, a seminal work on how to do that smudging as we connect our hearts and our head. Is that 18-inch journey is the longest journey a human will make in their lifetime, according to Don Coyhis. He talks about just really this idea of us as human beings, of being from with the medicine wheel. One of the interpretations is the 4 colors of human beings, of just as all people. How do we come together in this spiritual way? Susie Miller, a Haudenosaunee and Iroquois person, talking about the roots of talking circles. Another video about transforming the criminal justice system, and Indigenous overrepresentation, how we have currently overrepresentation by a long shot of Indigenous people in terms of in Canada and the United States, in terms of how many people are here versus how many people are at the criminal justice system. And another look at Indigenous peacemaking in that last video there. Some film TV recommendations, but before I do, I just wanted to look at what you all put for your responses to what you think of when you think of restorative justice in Indigenous communities. And I was very moved by that. And it was talked about a tribal approach to people and not systems, and how that is in our current judicial system in the United States, so much of a focus on system as opposed to a focus on those people. This idea of Ho'oponopono in Hawaii, and this idea, Ho'oponopono, to my understanding, means to do good over and over again. And one of my spouse and I, we have a friend named Chelsea, when she was growing up in Hawaii, in their schools, they would hold Ho'oponopono these times in their school, where they would hold these community gatherings to speak about what is going on in their community, what they need, and what is going on in the school. Very powerful tool. Kendra talking about the genocide in Rwanda and the use of Ubuntu. And to my understanding, Ubuntu is I am because we are. And a very powerful, profound idea that I am because we are. So powerful in the healing in Rwanda. Also, Kendra talked about the female perspective, which definitely, in terms of who I've been taught from, we're strong female leaders, matrilineal in our society as Ugwe, we are matrilineal as Oneida people. So for my grandmother and elder in our tribe, and also for my cousin Eddie Cornelius Gross, who is also a female and elder in our tribe. Looking at Hollow Water Community Holistic Circle Healing Approach, which was talked about in the text, and there was also a documentary which was mentioned in class as well too, from other classmates. People talking about the sacred spiritual practice and tradition being connected to the creator, and also talking about the circle making process in Alaska. I'm not sure the pronunciation on the tribe, whether it's like Kake, Kak, or probably something entirely different perhaps. But in this alcohol recovery program, and a person going through the program, that while they were in the program, people came to their house, helped cut wood for them and prepare a place for them. Just this community-minded aspect and community presence and community support. Just profound ideas. So thank you so much. Yawonko, thank you for your contributions. And this class is what we co-create here. As we're week 4, but this is just so exciting. Even though we're asynchronous, it's so exciting for me because I feel like we're all over Turtle Island. putting our minds together in this on these spiritual frequencies and being able to speak and share our truths. It's very exciting. I'm having a great time here. So Yawanko, I'm learning a lot from you all. So as we go here, we're back to where we were. This is talking about Indigenous film TV recommendations, because we gave you all some comic books to think about, to look at, some music, and now here, some films or TV shows. So first up, Reservation Dogs. It's on Hulu and FX. It's an all Indigenous writers, predominantly Indigenous cast, just telling Indigenous stories, oftentimes goofy, irreverent, but definitely a powerful storytelling tool, which I'm a big fan of. I binged watch it, and when I was visiting my grandma this summer, I watched it with her, and she loved it. She was like, well, what if some people don't understand like what smudging is when they're burning the sage and doing this and that? Because sometimes they just unapologetically just show Native culture without explaining it. But I'm like, Grandma, I think that's a great way for conversations to happen, for people to be exposed to culture in a visual setting through TV shows. Smoke Signals, 1998, still a timeless classic. A lot of quotable lines. Hey, Victor. This one guy talking to Victor and Thomas, the two main characters. Powwow Highway, another great film, 1989. Incident at Oglala, talking about the trial of Leonard Peltier and how he has been a political prisoner since, I believe, 1975, wrongly accused of a crime that he still maintains he did not do. And that's definitely a powerful film to educate yourself. Also a good book, The Trial of Leonard Peltier. Another film, Rumble, The Indians Who Rocked the World, came out in 2017, all about Native American influence on music, from jazz music to rock. Really powerful, really enjoy that. I'd encourage you all to check that out as well too. Reel, and this is a derogatory slur, but I'll use it, they use it in the film, Reel Engine. And the reel there is supposed to be a play on words for a film reel, as it's talking about Native American depiction in media and how oftentimes it's been wrong and put out misinformation. And even in 2009, it still has a lot of great points that are relevant here 12 years later. Spirit Game, Pride of a Nation. It's a film about the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse, and how lacrosse is this spirit game, this tool for bringing people together, for healing, and also for sovereignty. Keepers of the Game, 2016, about women's lacrosse players at Salmon River High School, which is a high school right on the border between Canada and the United States, and also next to the Mohawk Reservation for Haudenosaunee people. In the game of lacrosse, bringing healing and also to the women. Blood Quantum, which is a horror film, and I usually don't like horror, but this one is pretty powerful. A lot of it has Indigenous perspectives. There's the subtitles as there's First Nations languages being spoken on the screen, and it's fictionalized, but it's pretty interesting. Just an interesting take there with Indigenous perspectives in film in a modern setting. Doughboy in 2001, about this mixed blood individual, so I can definitely relate to that. But and also someone who's a hemophiliac, so something I cannot relate to, but I learned from. So he can bleed to death. So talking about this of someone who, there's a quote at the beginning. It talks about no one cares how much blood as a deer is, or how much they are. And with a human, they're always wondering how much Native I am. And sometimes I feel like with natives, you have to cut us open and watch the stories come out of us. That was a powerful line. Kind of butchered it there, but just paraphrasing. Trudell, about John Trudell, documentary from 2005. Hollow Water, bringing it back to restorative justice. This being off, I believe, in Winnipeg and this First Nations community, using it from sexual violence and healing and recovery. So this one's on my watch list after you all have been brought it up so kindly. Thank you so much. A lot of you have said you've seen it multiple times, so I can't wait to watch that. So as we bring it to a close here for this lecture on week 4, I want to use the words of Dr. Donald Warren, who his Lakota name, Pejuta Wikasa, which means medicine man. And I apologize for mispronunciation there. He's Oglala Lakota. And Dr. Donald Warren says, let us remember, we all drink from the same stream of consciousness. We are all connected by that same stream of consciousness. We are all related. What we do to each other, we do to ourselves. Act kindly toward my people, for indeed, my people are your people. So I just want to say, Yawanko, thank you all so much. Again, watch those videos if you're interested in the Indian Child Welfare Act. It's particularly important as there was in 1978, the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was a recommendation for Native children to go with Native families so they can be brought up in their own culture, that ideally they're put with a family member. If there's no family member, someone from their tribe or someone from a different tribe, as the American Psychological Association put forth recommendations saying that it is important for Indigenous people in their upbringing. All that to be said, Yawanko, Nugiwa, and Ganalunkwa. That means thank you, until next time, and I love you. So take care, everybody. Just remember to take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Remember that you are a human being worthy of love. So I do hope you're taking care of yourself. Just like you when you're on a plane, put on that oxygen mask of love before you're helping out others as well too. breathe like you love yourself, move like you love yourself, think like you love yourself. Until next time, thank you all so much. Have a good one.